Excellent. Welcome to TAD Summit Innovator Interviews. So today I'm talking to Amandine, who's the COO and co-founder for Element. I'm sure we'll learn a little bit more about how that relates to all the brands that exist in and around Matrix. She's also the co-founder for thematrix.org. The matrix.org Foundation. Got to get the right terminology here. And also Matthew, who's the technical co-founder for matrix.org and also the CEO, CTO, and co-founder for Element. Thank you for your time.
No, thanks for having us.
Hi, Alan.
No, and I'm going to start, as I said, on first of all, I do want to thank you for hosting the chat service, so Riot for TAD Global. We're using it more and more, and the Federation people are getting it because we can bring in other Slack groups, because some people prefer Slack, and that's okay. And we don't enforce, but it was really cool this year where we had several Slack groups that were in, so you could see what was happening in the UK, and then people in Berlin could chat in the UK group, and it was actually going through to the Slack group that was being used, all thanks to Riot. So yeah, I would say this year was the first time, rather than me just saying, use Riot, don't use Slack, Slack evil. This was now people are seeing the core benefit of Federation. So that was really cool to see. But on to the questions, starting on a high note. What were your darkest times with Matrix so far? And more importantly, for innovators going through their dark times at the moment, what advice do you have to help them to hang on in there and work through to the light?
Wow, positive question. I mean, 2020 needed some sort of optimism,
I
right?
know, uplift, yes.
You want to go first?
I think we probably have the same answer, right? Our darkest time has probably been the time where we got hacked, basically.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's one of them.
Probably one of them. Maybe it was so dark that you try to forget it.
Yeah.
Basically, one of the system we used, we didn't update it quickly enough and had what's the word? I lost it.
Compromise.
Yeah, I got compromised. We got compromised via this system, basically.
Yes, that was April of last year, I guess, 2019. So relatively recently, where basically after one of our previous darker moments, which I'll talk about in a minute, we had ended up with two data centers. One was a properly managed and professionally constructed production environment for all of our paid customers as Element. So for instance, the one that is hosting the TAD server right now. But we also had a legacy system that had been set up in a mad rush when we'd had to vacate our previous data center. And as Amandine says, it's possible that we weren't keeping it patched quite as much as we should. And also we were running a public continuous integration server called Jenkins, which was a very generous thing to do for the community, but was also a pretty stupid thing to do because it's infamously insecure. So when it got compromised and we realized that somebody had root on every box on that entire data center, that was a pretty bad time, quite a stressful period. And honestly, what we did was to handle it as best we could in terms of flushing out the attacker, which meant burning the data center to the ground and rebuilding it from first principles, but also writing a big postmortem of precisely the mess that we got into and how we got out of it, which seems to have ironically got even more press attention than the original attack did. But on the plus side, it was a positive learning opportunity for everybody rather than just bad news all around. So yeah, that was pretty bad in retrospect. So bad that I've kind of blanked it out of my life, apart from the post-mortem. I think the one I was going to suggest was when we almost ran out of money. That back in 2017, we'd been working on Matrix for 3 years, and it had been incubated by a company called Amdocs, who do big telco billing solutions. And we were in a bizarre catch-22 that the project was successful, but also it was becoming too much of a financial drain on Amdocs. We needed the project to be independent, neutral of Amdocs, and they no longer wanted to be the ones paying the whole bill. So we had to somehow find a way to get our independence. And suffice it to say that we tried to raise money for a long time, was part of Amdocs, and that was not going to happen because people don't invest in a fully
fully owned.
Yeah, fully owned sort of division of a company like Amdocs.
Exactly, yeah.
So we had, we knew we could raise money, but to do that, we had to completely walk out the door. And so we had the whole Matrix team who 1 minute had a job at a big Fortune 500 company,
Yep.
and next minute said, okay, everybody, we need to just walk out the door and take our money. And we had to raise seed funding to support the project in a couple of months. Otherwise, it would have been dead.
Yeah.
And when we say the Matrix team, it was 12 people at the time. So that was quite a big team to support. So we needed enough money to do that.
I mean, considered robbing a bank, or
yeah. But yeah, kudos to the team for having faith in the project and in us, because that was quite
and to the community critically for supporting us, because we literally got by on Patreon donations and cryptocurrency donations, which were both, I think they literally paid for a significant amount of salary at the time, but also they meant that we could go to investors and say, hey, look, guys, if you put $5 million in the pot, we've got a really strong signal that our community wants us to survive. And that was absolutely critical as a way to get off the ground. And also a huge thanks to Status, who went and actually supported us as the seed investors in what became New Vector, now Element.
Exactly. I mean, that was really great timing. It was just endorsement from a really cool group of developers that were, at the start, doing some really, interesting stuff and putting Ethereum in your pocket. I think it just provided that endorsement, and it showed that the whole decentralized web is real, it's growing, and there's an ever-growing community of people around that. So yeah, I just remember 2017. It was like, in terms of normal email response time from Amandine and Matthew, it just disappeared, And as a favor, because I knew it was tough times, I was like, look, I'll just, you could be a sponsor. You don't need to worry. We'll just include you in there. It's free marketing, And it's like, is anybody going to turn up, for the London? And even though, you were stretched so thin, it was tough times. I think in 2017, as of our global sponsors, you had more hacks than any of the sponsors, and you were going through hell at the time. So well done.
Well, if nothing else, we had to make sure that the project itself was on the right track in 2017. Exactly. In practice, we're still suffering some of the side effects of rushing it in order to have too many proof of concepts. I don't know, we did a whole VR thing, we did 3D video calling, we did all sorts of stuff to say, look how cool this could be, give us money, please. So, but in the end, it's fun to hack on, and I'm glad that a lot of people hacked on it back then, and we need to properly get back into the swing of supporting and getting people hacking on it in future attacks.
Excellent. No, the door is always open. Now, one of the things that impressed me, I think it was last year or the year before. I think it was the year before. It was hinted at, but then it became public 2019, was the wins you had with the French government, with TCHAP, but also following on from that, subsequent wins with the German military, German administration for adopting Matrix. Getting enterprise customers is tough. It's expensive. It's time consuming. I'm interested in I'm not asking you to give away secret sauce, because obviously you do have some secret sauce there, because it's not just one-off, you're doing it sort of systematically. But why did they choose Matrix versus, say, Teams or Wire or Telegram or one of the other communication platforms that are out there?
Well, the secret sauce is to build something that people need, right? Basically, Matrix, if it's perfectly the needs and the organization of a government, because they're completely decentralized, they want complete control, and they want transparency. So if you tell them, hey, I have an open source messaging solution, which is decentralized, which means every ministry can have complete control on the security level, on their server, etc., which federated so that each ministry can talk to one another and end-to-end encrypted, and you run it yourself, well, yeah, they come. Because that's precisely what they need.
Interesting. One of the challenges has been, government procurement, because it sort of forces procurement not towards startups. It's more big brands, whether it's a Germanic brand or a French brand. how did you break through that? I mean, was it just because the fit was so strong, because you were open source, it just became, there was no alternative? Again, I apologize for laboring this, but it was, I think, a unique win that really cemented your commercial position.
I think that we might have been in the right time at the right place in terms of open government becoming a more serious proposition. I mean, people have been talking about, hey, why don't we throw away all of our Windows licenses and use Linux for 20 years now?
Yes.
And sometimes they've even done it, and it's not always ended well. But I think in the last couple of years, we've seen a realization that something like this, the open source offering, can be as good as Slack or Teams. And frankly, the fact that it's that we can provide professional services, going and customizing it and tweaking it to their precise need is better than just picking up Open Office or whatever and hoping that it will magically be a drop-in replacement for Microsoft Office back in the day. So we've been able to give them the IP experience as the people who created the protocol, as well as building element to fork it into chat. And frankly, the people we've been working with at the Ministry of Digital, or DINOM, as it is in France, have been incredibly on the right page. Like I can remember our first meeting there, we turned up and we were expecting it to be lots of bureaucracy and as the French government and everything. And in practice, I think the opening number was one of the guys in the room saying, so I've already built an antivirus solution for Matrix, which is using Fuse, the user land file system thing. And I've hooked it into ClamAV on my Raspberry Pi where I run my server at home. And I was wondering if this was a viable approach. And it was like, hang on a second. You're the first person we've ever heard of who has run antivirus on Matrix, let alone doing it yourself on a Raspberry Pi. You're the sort of people we want to work with.
Yeah, and Tim Panton.
yeah, precisely. It's a real Tim style overlap. And I think that makes the procurement process a lot easier if you've got like-minded techies on both sides, and if you're lucky enough to find like-minded techies on both sides who just want to get the job done. And procurement in the end, if the customer and the supplier both want the same thing, then hopefully procurement will actually help make that happen.
Yeah, I guess I'm just too biased and bitter and twisted on the telco side.
So honestly, we've almost found that governments are almost easier than telcos.
I think, again, it's the product, though. Like in Amdocs, obviously, we spent years basically selling a very similar proposition, albeit as proprietary in the form of Amdocs Unified Comms. And then it was really painful with procurement because we were competing with RCS, we were competing with things which looked quite similar, or to the telcos at least felt quite similar. And if you're not the only offer, if you're not the only thing on the table, then yes, something that procurement can get their teeth into. But at the moment, at least, touch wood, we're still the only option, so it makes the conversation a bit easier.
Well, I would say your accounts that you have sort of make it like a shoe-in for the rest of the European Union. I'm not saying what the UK might do. They always seem to want to go their own way, but we won't go there. So moving on to decentralized web. Again, the timing for the status investment, and also I think what it demonstrated to the broader community, that decentralized web is here, it's real, there's an ever-growing community, and it's doing some really cool stuff. I brought Web3 or decentralized web into TED Summit several times, and I have it's my challenge. In trying to not convince people, but help people understand its importance and its timing. It sort of reminds me back in the day between the static and the dynamic web, when I was explaining its importance around real-time communication services, and everybody was going, what are you talking about, Alan? It's just websites and the rest. And from Web 1 to Web 2, and from where we are today, the dynamic web into the decentralized web, it's as fundamental, if not more fundamental, a shift. And also turning the internet more to be more user-centric, in that you have more control over your privacy, over basically your own data. How do you, sort of communicate, as a poster child, let's face it, you are one of the poster childs for the decentralized web. How do you communicate its impact and timing to help people sort of, get on board the decentralized train?
The thing is, we have to communicate the value it brings. So it's not like you should go decentralized for the sake of it.
Strategy.
Guys, think what about the time when email were allowing you to send email only in your own company? Well, it changed, right? Because it's stupid. So why are we today in a world where people are only able to send messages within one single app? And yes, there may be billions of users in this app, but still you're locked completely in a silo and under the power of one big corporation somewhere in Silicon Valley. So that's the angle we take, basically trying to make people understand the value of it, the fact that you get some control over your data, etc. It's not easy. I completely agree with you. And today, people who get it are people who actually care about data ownership and their privacy.
Exactly. It's a slow burn in the end. As you say, by the time everybody's on it, it would be impossible to imagine a world without it. But in the short term, the friction comes from whether you can compete with WhatsApp or Discord or Slack or whatever the incumbent centralized system is. Because let's face it, unless they are rabidly pro-decentralization in the first place, if we flag somebody on the Chiswick High Road down right now and say, hey, do you want to use this app? The first thing they're going to do is to check whether it's got the same stickers and the same custom emoji and smileys and everything that they get on Slack. And if it doesn't, they don't care about the decentralization aspects. So, I mean, it's tough. Another one, though, is just plain old spreading the word. And I think, and I haven't actually checked this, but we had the opportunity to do a contributed article for TechCrunch beginning of 2016 called basically, why do we need to decentralize the web? And I said, hey, this is, I used the same analogy. We had Web 1 to Web 2, and now this is some kind of Web 3. And I think I might have been the first person to try to describe the decentralized web, at least, as Web 3, for better or worse. Certainly, we got an extraordinary amount of response from it, mainly from investors saying, oh, this sounds exciting. Helped us when we ran out of money the next year. But at least we were we were basically putting this story into play. And the nice thing is, a bit like the Web 2.0 thing, it's not just a marketing gimmick. It really is a total paradigm shift from the old static sites to now everything's become an application. I can remember the light bulb moment when I realized, when was the last time I installed a desktop app on my Mac versus just used a browser, and that the browser had basically become the operating system. You can see the same thing happening here in a peer-to-peer world. But the difference is that it's way harder than anything we've seen before. So we've got peer-to-peer matrix as a project. We've been working on it seriously for almost a year now. It's been a bit sporadic because it often ends up blocked on actual matrix, and then we go to the peer-to-peer bits again. But we're still trying to find the best platforms to build on. So we did one using IPFS and the P2P. We've done one using a project called Yggdrasil. There's other experimental sort of peer-to-peer layers, and it's really an open area of research. It's not like, in fact, it's just like Ajax in the early days of Web 2. You remember when people were saying, how are we going to do these interactive web apps? Is it going to be Ajax? Is it going to be Comet, whatever that was? Is it going to be long-lived GET requests? And it really feels like the same thing. That once people have established the best practices, we'll be there. But it's not there.
Oh no, and it takes time, because it's not a point-to-point problem. It's a multi-point problem. So you've got that sort of, almost like n factorial in there. I think that adds in a hell of a lot of complexity. But it's good that you're working on IPFS. I'm sure David would be very happy with you using that.
Yeah, we've talked to him quite a lot. He's been our main point of contact on the P2P stuff.
Excellent.
It was very good to meet him in Lisbon once upon a time.
I know, yeah, you two that was it. It was just kindred souls geeking out. Now, I guess following on from my difficulty in communicating, and I agree with you, just focus on the immediate near-term value and find kindred spirits and just grow from there. Because if you view the sort of vision as being a reality that will come, then all you're doing is you just basically knocking down the bowling pins and moving through. So let's look 10 years out. So it's 2030. How is the world different with Matrix?
Well, our 10-year vision is that basically Matrix become the communication layer for the web. And any smartphone out there has a Matrix app installed. It may be Elements, it may be any other Matrix application.
Yeah.
We don't really care. There would be thousands, hundreds of thousands of company building on top of Matrix. And then people don't even realize they're using Matrix. They're just chatting and it works across the app, and they can choose where they host that data. And that's very much what we're aiming for.
I think we could see the same pattern. Oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say we could see the same pattern as we saw with the web in some ways, or even the internet, that it starts off in public sector with lots of universities, lots of government institutions using it as a way to collaborate, and then a whole bunch of rabid techies wearing socks and sandals getting very enthusiastic about the sort of open source revolution, and you have a kind of grassroots movement coming up, and you've got the top-down government stuff, and that's where we are today. And if we play it right, then just like the internet or the web, you kind of converge the two, and before the rest of society knows it, they are part of the same ecosystems. I mean, that's the dream. But we did have an eye-opener, a bit like the French government thing about, when was it? It was last summer. And we can't talk about the details because they are at least informally NDA'd, but suffice to say that one of the top 5 phone manufacturers in the world revealed that they were working on putting Matrix into not just the OS, but the hardware of their phones alongside GSM. And that was a very interesting conversation to have, as they said, hey, so we're in the middle of doing this. How do we make it work? We can't talk about the specifics, and honestly, it'll be interesting to see when it comes to market, if it comes to market, but to realize that some very, very famous, well-known household brands were seriously spinning out R&D units to figure out how to turn GSM into Matrix, basically, is a step in the right direction.
Exactly.
If we could take that to its logical extreme, then everybody will be hacking on Matrix rather than...
Exactly. I mean, it's, my phone is connected Wi-Fi. There's no need for it to be, and it's connected, by, a couple hundred, megabits bidirectional. I don't need basically 5G or 4G or anything, and this is going to be sat here for the next 8-10 hours. I might not even, I will leave to pick up my son. So there will be most probably 20 minutes of the day where I'll need sort of mobile connectivity, but then it's reduced functionality that I need then anyway, because I'm out and traveling, whatever. So it's, I think, everybody is aligned around the vision. And I have to admit, and it was just the point I was going to make, this was the first year with, TATAC Global, where, I just hop into basically, the general group, and you'd see all the different locations. And because we were basically sort of bridging in to other chats, it's done transparently. You don't know, you don't care where the conversation is taking place. It's just a conversation with, Rob Pickering or Sebastian to discuss particular topics as they're getting up one of the sponsors' APIs. So, and that was very powerful because the volume, the richness of the communication just jumps orders of magnitude. Rather than it's trapped within that particular silo, and some people are using it, but then some people are sort of using Slack as well. As soon as you bridge, it just blossoms. So I think we're all aligned on where the vision is. Now looking at, because you have to put food on the table, revenue, it's important. So what are the lines of revenue for Element? How do you see those changing over time?
It's definitely your question.
So today, lines of revenue are basically on-premise deployments and SaaS deployments. We have Element Matrix Services, EMS, SaaS platform on one hand, and then we have bigger contracts with like governments and the like, where we provide consulting and support to help.
So it's all the professional services wrap around that.
Gotcha. Something we're working on, and we had a first implementation of it is actually provide some services via the App Store. So today in Element, you can actually run integrations and bots, widgets. And the idea we had at some point, we were selling sticker packs And basically the idea would be to have a proper Matrix app store available where people could potentially sell their own content. So if you want to set up your consulted gig and have people pay a subscription to be able to talk to you, that's something you could do. So that's the kind of things we're thinking about for the future.
Interesting. Yeah, I always have a little bit of a sort of knee-jerk, oh, not yet another app store. But because, again, the bridging across multiple networks, it's very different to being, within our silo, we just want to try and monetize it.
Also, it would be available to any other Matrix app. You wouldn't have to install Element to actually use it. It would be available to any app. So.
I mean, quite a good example could be, say, PSTN bridges. I mean, in practice, let's face it, old PSTN isn't quite dead. And there's
it'll be around 2030. It's still going to be around 2040. You know, unfortunately, it's like SS7. Is SS7 dead? No.
No, definitely not. I'm frankly amazed that I can't send telegrams anymore. Suffice to say, that could be a really obvious thing that we could provide as a value add for the entire Matrix ecosystem. And as you say, it's not just Element. It's if you're hacking on TADHack and you've gone and built your own little Matrix client, so you've gone and hooked up your doorbell, smart doorbell thing or whatever it might be, running a Raspberry Pi to talk Matrix, just being able to use us as a Twilio for Matrix, for want of a better word, would be a nice...
no, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I've not really thought around that. Then just wrapping up, what do you see as being some of the greatest risks to Matrix going forward?
This is a topical one. You probably saw that the UK Home Office set out this amazing statement about 10 days ago to declare that all right-thinking countries should put end-to-end encryption backdoors into everything to mitigate public safety concerns, which is obviously a reasonable concern, but the solution is massively flawed, and they got 6 other governments to sign off on it too. And this is obviously deeply concerning, that if end-to-end encryption was ruled that was basically made illegal, our biggest value is in the security and the encryption of Matrix, taking signals end-to-end encryption and then decentralizing it for Matrix.
Yes.
So we just went and put out a response to this yesterday. Which
I retweeted.
Oh, you did? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's subsequently gone viral today rather than yesterday, which is a bit weird. It's currently on the top of Hacker News.
Oh, cool. Congrats.
About it. Because I think the interesting thing is that it's not just us saying backdoors are bad because they make no sense, because they let the bad guys in.
Exactly.
It's providing an alternative. And decentralized reputation is what we're going for here. So critically, a morally relative reputation system, which is the thing that nobody gets. Everybody thinks, oh my God, reputation, that sounds like the Chinese social credit system. Whereas in fact, it's the opposite. It means that if somebody maintains a reputation list of not safe for work content in Matrix, say, I could choose to tune it in, Amandine could choose to tune it out. So it's entirely up to people what they want to subscribe to, rather than there being any absolute view that NSFW stuff is good or evil. Yeah. And that would apply to everything, spam or any kind of content, and in the extreme case, even abusive stuff like terrorism or child abuse imagery, etc., where, for instance, a government could publish basically a block list of hashes of content and rooms and users that are known to, you do not want to have this on your server. That'd be a kind of useful thing to have. So we're trying to build the system into Matrix, but to actually answer your question, the biggest existential risk by far is that the network gets overrun by folks who want to do particularly unpleasant stuff on it. Yeah. And we're up to, what, 22 million users now and about 55,000 deployments. Mm-hmm. And that's enough to have a wide cross-section of society, particularly folks who have been deplatformed from Discord and Reddit, etc.
Yeah, YouTube, and the list goes on. Yeah, absolutely.
We have to fix that. I'm quite excited, honestly, about having a concrete proposal, and we've hopefully hired somebody to work on it full-time as a developer starting in the next couple of weeks.
Excellent.
And it's been a tough gig to interview for, because A, no one has solved this, so it's open area of research, and B, it involves some fairly unpleasant parts of the internet, but
and the cool thing is that once we've built it for Matrix, it's a model that can be used for any social media.
Exactly.
Anyone
Exactly.
could use this, and it can become just a new way of moderating the internet in general.
That's it. And there's so much contextual information that you don't, I mean, it's almost like the back door is like, yeah, it just gives you an access to a piece of information flow. You have access to, because you know the app, you know the phone, you know basically the type of phone, you can potentially get access to the account, how long they've had the phone. There's so much contextual information that can be used that isn't harnessed today, that you don't need to be punching back doors just to get one additional element of information, pardon the pun, but it's actually, they just need to focus on context and start actually gathering that data. I mean, for example, Telesign, they just sit in the telephony networks and they just gather, information associated with phone numbers, and then use that to help in terms of defining, is this a number likely to spam? Is this, a sort of dodgy number because it shifted accounts several times? Has it been blacklisted? Stuff that should be remembered and never is.
Yeah.
So, I think there's tons of ways that this can be solved rather than just, creating insecurity across platforms that, to achieve the vision, have to be inherently secure.
Yeah, we see it as basically providing the primitives in the protocol itself to support Telesign and Newstar and, heaven forbid, Experian and kind of anybody who is managing some kind of their view of the world.
Exactly.
Making it an open marketplace. So if I want to go and publish my reputation of the best possible Matrix content or the best possible Doctor Who episodes or whatever, I have the ability to do that on an equal footing to, say, Telesign offering as a paid service, say.
Exactly.
We have an economy of reputation data where if you have spent ages cleaning and massaging and getting really high quality reputation metrics for E164 numbers like they do, then just go and charge people however many $1,000 a month to access it for however many queries, and that sounds like a great company.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like Reddit Karma,
Yep.
Cool. No, this has been great. Again, Amandine, Matthew, always enjoy having some time to sit down and chat with you. Thanks so much for sharing, very frankly, your experiences, and good luck for the future. And hopefully we'll see you back with TADHack soon.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks,
Love to speak to you. Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye-bye.